Evet, Uludağ Ekonomi Zirvesi'nde sıradaki oturum TEP
Right now,
sponsorluğunda
this session will be sponsored by TEP and it's called Frugal Innovation. I will invite two important panelists to the platform. We are continuing with the Frugal Innovation. TEP General Manager Ümit Leblebici and the Innovation Consultant Navi RADJOU. Please come to the platform. This session will be comprised of 2 people only.
Sahneye davet ediyoruz. Please welcome. Ve sözü Ümit Bey'e bırakıyorum.
Okay, I think we are. Sure.
Şu mikrofonu kullanayım. Bunu bana ayarlarım. Evet, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Bu panelde Navi ile konuşacağız. Navi tutumlu...
Speak with Navi RADJOU. Navi RADJOU is one of the most important people of Frugal Innovation.
For us, you are a kind of king of frugal economy. When we say the frugal economy,
Tabii tutumlu inovasyon dediğimiz zaman şöyle bir şey anlatmaya çalışıyoruz. Daha azla daha fazla şey nasıl yapabiliriz?
First of all, the concept of frugal economy is something that I experienced growing up in India. I grew up in a city called Pondicherry in southern India, and we actually had water that was rationed, so we received water only 2 hours a day. So, so the notion of frugality is kind of embedded in the culture of a lot of developing countries. And over time, as the societies evolve and the economies develop themselves, we lose touch with that frugality. And today we have, I would say, an economic engine that consumes a lot of resources and generates a lot of negative externalities in terms of, social inequality, environmental, degradation, etc. So frugal innovation frugal economy is a way to kind of bring back that frugality into the economic system, not to necessarily generate less growth. I don't believe in it, but actually generate growth that is socially inclusive and environmentally, responsible as well. So you begin to see this kind of frugal economy emerging already around the world, based on 3 important principles, which is the fact that you try to waste nothing, and that's basically what we call today the circular economy, whereby everything you generate as a waste can be reused as a raw material to make new products. So this carpet, after 5-7 years, you can recover that and make a new product out of that. And then the second principle is that everybody becomes a value creator. That means that there's no more separation between a producer and the customer, because the customer can become what we call a prosumer. They can start making products themselves, and we'll talk about that as well. And the third principle is that essentially you go from limiting your carbon footprint to enlarging your carbon handprint, energy handprint. That what it means is that essentially...
That's very important. We don't
exactly.
pay attention to that.
That's right. So we think right now with the climate change conference done, we just have to reduce our carbon emissions. That's not enough. That's the carbon footprint. The next level, if your competition says, I'm going to do more than that, I'm actually going to increase my ecological handprint. That means I'm going to invest in energy positive buildings that actually generate more energy because there are solar, panels on the rooftop. Unilever's new headquarters in Paris actually generates solar energy and can actually power about 300 households in near Paris. Okay, so this is basically, the principle of frugal economy is an economy that actually tries to generate more economic and social value without having those negative externalities that characterize today's economy.
That's very important actually, because when I listen to you, I'm just inspiring that maybe people are not talking about what is the future economy. And if you look at the resources, we will have a resources problem. And also, what kind of world we would like to,
Yes.
live through. So
That's right.
that's quite important. So you also wrote a book, which is I believe that the bestseller last year in the management book
Yes.
called Frugal Innovation. What inspired you to write this book?
I mean, frugal innovation is interesting, right? I spent, as I said, 19 years in India, and then I studied in France. I'm a French citizen as well. So, and then now I'm living in Silicon Valley. So it's very interesting to see the contrast between how people innovate in places like Silicon Valley versus places like India or Africa. If you're in Silicon Valley, of course, all of us, we have this, right? I live next to Cupertino, where Apple is headquartered, but this one cost $600. And this is
I
not
have the bigger one. So
exactly right. You see, actually, you see your reaction, right? You're saying you have a bigger one. So that's what happens. We are in this race, like arms race, for innovation, right? Who has the bigger, iPhone, the sexier iPhone, with more functionality? But in places like Africa or India, actually, people can't afford to have a $600, dollar iPhone. And so what you begin to see is essentially a different approach to innovation, where you come up with products that are affordable, of good quality, sustainable, but also actually addresses the fundamental needs of the society. Whether it's, you know that very well, in Kenya, there is something called M-Pesa, which enables people to send, receive money, right, without having a bank account. That's not good for your business, but that's the whole point, right? So they're going from no banking.
That's a challenge for us as
Of
well.
course, yeah. And actually, some banks actually go to Africa to learn about, this kind of new model, so they can bring it back, in the West as well. So I thought I will show you an actual example of a frugal innovation, because I'm very practical type. So let's pick a situation. So there are today millions of premature babies born around the world. And many of them die, especially in the developing world, simply because they don't have an incubator to keep these babies warm. An incubator today in the Western world costs about $20,000 and requires electricity to operate. So if you go to a village in Africa or Mexico, you can do that. So 4 students from Stanford University came up with this very interesting solution that I brought here. So this is actually looks like a mini sleeping bag, except that inside it has actually this material that looks like wax. It's called phase change material. And what you do essentially is that you can put it on a heating pad or maybe even in boiling water, so it melts, and then you reinsert that into this device, and then it allows the mother to actually hold the baby right against her while keeping the baby at constant temperature for 6 hours straight. And this solution cost only $200, which is 1% of the cost of the incubators in the West, and doesn't require any electricity, right? And this simple solution over the last 4 years has saved the lives of 200,000 babies.
That's incredible.
Okay? So this is really frugal innovation, which is you can come up with a simple enough solution that yet delivers great value at a very low cost.
That's incredible. There are always, some solutions for something. Maybe we are missing these solutions.
For basic needs, yeah.
On that.
Sure.
So you travel a lot. You see different countries. What can you tell about Turkey? What can you advise about Turkey? What can we do when you see Turkey? There might be some opportunity for Turkey. What do you think?
I mean, first of all, I come twice a year to Turkey, so it's a country that I have a lot of respect for many reasons, but one I will tell in a minute. But I think one thing that impressed me about Turkey is that it really represents the frugal mindset, right? The frugal innovation mindset or the frugal economy. It's a frugal economy because you don't have oil, you don't have gas, you don't have some of the natural resources that some of your neighboring countries have. And yet, out of nothing, you're able to create wealth and prosperity. And that's like being like an alchemist, right? Out of nothing, you can create value, right? That is fundamentally what I admire about Turkey, right? Its ability to generate value with very limited resources. I think that's
That
something.
makes us happy. So, if you look at our neighborhood today, they have resources. Are they happy? I have a question.
I'm not sure exactly. So the point is that you may not have resources, but you are resourceful. And I think that is kind of, my mantra is that, try to tap into the resourcefulness because you can go out looking for external resources which are anyway dwindling. Oil, water, right? We all know that. But the one which is inside, resourcefulness, ingenuity, wisdom, etc., empathy, that is abundant. It will always be, there. The second thing I like is the fact that I'm beginning to see some very interesting startups from Turkey. 2 weeks ago, there was a person, he may be a young person, Semit Kalvo is his name. He has launched this company called Biopipe, which is very much in line with what we talked about earlier. So the idea is essentially to allow each house to collect wastewater, recycle it, and use it again. So instead of having, a big, wastewater system, a sewage system, essentially each house, as I talked about the energy positive building, you become a water positive building. Okay? So you don't depend on external water. You can create your own water, right? So I thought that's a fascinating kind of, so this is not a, an entrepreneur who's coming up with the next kind of, Facebook application, but actually, trying to deal, with some serious issues. And then some of the things that yourself are doing, right, in terms of, supporting entrepreneurs. The Innovation Week that was hosted last year, I think is important because one of the things I see in India, which is phenomenally amazing, right? When I left the country 25 years ago, India, if you are an entrepreneur, you go to your mother and father and say, I want to become an entrepreneur, they will be like, you should be hospitalized, go see a doctor or something like that, right? So entrepreneur was a very dangerous job, right? More dangerous than, being, in the army or something. But what happened is that in the last couple of years, the image of an entrepreneur has gone much more positive. And you have now billionaires, entrepreneurs now. So you have the first generation of entrepreneurs that have become so successful, they're becoming the role models. And I think that Turkey needs more such role models. And I think things like Innovation Week would be a place, to showcase these entrepreneurs.
We are one of the main sponsors of Innovation Week. Also, as a bank, we are, the only bank in the country. We are just focusing on the startups. You are absolutely right. I believe that there is an opportunity here. All entrepreneurship structure is changing, and everybody must follow this one. But when we talk about innovation in Turkey, innovation is something different that everyone wants to create iPhone. Is it the right strategy, or do we have to, think differently, make smaller things more efficient, people may use, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question, right? I was telling someone yesterday, in Silicon Valley right now, the rage is about self-driving cars, right? Cars without drivers. So Google is investing massively in it, as you know. Apple has some patents on that. And then there are some investors, like Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal, complains that that's not enough. We need to think about flying cars, right? So it's always about, the next big thing, right? But in Oslo, the capital of Norway, by 2020, there will be no cars. No cars. It's going to be the world's first carless city. They're investing $1 billion in a biking path for biking. So you have two paradigms. One that says, let's keep using more technology to sustain, in my opinion, an old model. And then you have this new model, which is emerging, where people say, I don't need a car. Right? So clearly you can see that, so my point is that there are two things that have happened. One is that technology has to be, developed in a way that actually serves humanity and not just investors. And the second thing is that sometimes you have to wonder whether you need to create the next big thing in technology, or do you need to create the next society? Or actually maybe we consume less, but we live better.
That's important. Next society, what kind of society we will have in the future? That's a big question mark.
I call it Frugal Society. That's actually the name of a book I'm writing right now, coming up later this year. And it's a society where everybody focuses on maximizing their well-being and potential and others while making wise and creative use of resources. So the idea is that essentially the goal of growth is not just economic growth, but it's also about human growth. And so I think that's kind of where I see in Scandinavia, in Netherlands, in several parts of Europe, I see they're going very, very fast in that direction. Even though I'm American, I am ashamed to say that our consciousness hasn't that evolved. I think we are still stuck in a very consumerist, kind of, mindset. But I see places in Europe, actually, like Finland, offering like,
that we are getting more materialist, or?
I think we are, and I think that's also a challenge I see even a country like India, where I think actually we kind of losing touch with the sense of frugality and the sense of sustainability. But I'm, always confident that, in a developing world, what happens is that, you start very poor, and you kind of get like a pendulum, You have to kind of go the other extreme of it, get a taste of it, and then eventually I'm sure that the pendulum will swing back and settle, somewhere in the middle.
That's important. Also, you are the curator of the Wave exhibition. If you remember, in December Innovation Week, we brought the Wave exhibition to Turkey. How come you have an idea why you said that let me have an exhibition called Wave?
I mean, Wave is, for those of you who don't know, it's actually an exhibition that actually came also in Istanbul, and I think you were actually a key kind of catalyst for bringing it to Istanbul. I couldn't come, I apologize, but as a curator of Wave, so Wave essentially is an exhibition that showcases 20 projects from around the world of how everyday citizens with very limited resources are able to tackle big challenges. One example to give you an idea, a 15-year-old American kid named Jack Andraka, it's one of the projects at Wave, has created a way to detect pancreatic cancer for 5 cents in 5 minutes. That's 200 times faster, cheaper, better than existing solutions. Okay? So you can see that this is a kid who is not a doctor, he's not a scientist, his uncle died of pancreatic cancer, and he decided I have to do something about it. So that's what we are saying, is that Wave is essentially a celebration of collective ingenuity. That is essentially what will happen if 7 billion people in the world are not just 7 billion consumers, but they become 7 billion innovators. And more importantly, they start collaborating and they start sharing, ideas and best practices. Then you can actually build a whole different, a better world. And so the way it began is essentially I was, passionate about, the idea of ingenuity and how do we give power to everyday citizens? Because I think right now what's happening is that you watch the news, you see what's happening in the economy, and I think we don't have trust in ourselves anymore. Right? So I think Wave, was an exhibition to kind of restore that self-confidence and show that actually if you want to be an innovator, you don't need to have a big R&D lab. As a joke, the street is the lab. You can now innovate literally in the street.
Let me say that part in Turkish. Wave'i gezmek isterseniz şu anda TEB'in arka salonunda Wave'in bir visual örneği var. Bu visual örnek şöyle, gözlükleri takıyorsunuz. Navi'nin size burada anlattığı dünyadaki örneklerini visual olarak salonun içinde gezdiğiniz gibi geziyorsunuz. Sadece exhibition'ı gezmek önemli değil ama o visual havayı yaşamak da önemli. Beni gerçekten çok etkiledi. Herkes orada test edebilir diye düşünüyorum. You are also strategic.
Did you mention the fact
Wave
that
exhibition? Yes, I said that you can use the glasses and you can,
I have to say, I think we are too modest, but that was not available in any other country, right?
Thank you.
It's only in Turkey. It's actually a Turkish entrepreneur who developed it. I spent 1 hour this morning talking to him. That alone is a frugal innovation. That kid developed that in 6 weeks with very limited resources.
Biz de onlarla gurur duyduk. We are proud of them.
Right, because if that was developed in Silicon Valley, it would have taken 1 year and $2 million in budget. So that's something that you have to be proud of. So.
I was just saying that you're also strategist for Silicon Valley companies. So could you give some examples about frugal innovation implementation in Intel, Google, in big companies in Silicon Valley?
Silicon Valley, large companies like Facebook, Google, it's hard for them to do frugal innovation, right? Because there are so many resources. So some interesting initiatives are happening in, let's say, Facebook. Today, there are 5 billion people in the world who don't have access to internet, or they may have 2G networks at most, right? So we are in Silicon Valley, we are already going from 4G to 5G, right? So if you're developing an application, a mobile app, for those 5 billion people, you cannot relate to that because you don't understand what it is to be in a place where download is like so slow, right? So to build empathy with these 5 billion people in the world, every Tuesday at Facebook headquarters, they downgrade the bandwidth level from 5G to 2G. So suddenly, you can't access email quick enough. You can't surf on the internet fast enough. So if you're a developer, you begin to really understand the pain of your end user. You can get yourself in the shoes, of what it takes, to be in those, very, poor countries with low bandwidth. So that's one example. Then I brought some other examples that show that Silicon Valley is also becoming the place where people are beginning to create very interesting solutions using very affordable technologies. So one of the development right now in the technology world is that you begin to see these kind of components. We call them open source hardware. So what it is this one is called the Raspberry Pi, and this is essentially a computer the size of a credit card. You see, it's as thin as that. And this one has 900 megahertz.
What is the cost of it?
$30.
$30.
And
what
last,
can I do with this $30?
And that's the thing, right? So $30. And 2 months ago, they even came up with a $5 version, less, kind of, sophisticated one. So what it means is that once you have this, this becomes the building block with which you can start creating all kind of amazing applications. It could be for education. This was taken to a space station, International Space Station, to conduct experiments. And then you can actually have entrepreneurs saying, hey, if I have these low-cost components, I can start making solutions in healthcare, farming, etc. So my neighbor in Silicon Valley actually has been using these very cheap components to create this application. So California, as you know, is facing a major water shortage, and California is also the world's second largest food, producer, agriculture producer. So we have to learn to do more with less. So this is a solution for farmers. Essentially, these are wireless sensors designed like a plastic ruler, so a farmer can just stick in their farm, different places, and you start collecting detailed information on soil moisture, humidity rate, and air, sunlight, air temperature, etc. And it allows essentially the farmers to better use water, fertilizers.
You can easily increase the
yield.
production.
That's right. So you increase not just the quantity of your crops, but the quality of crops as well, right? Which is interesting. And the solution pays for itself within 10 months.
That's incredible.
Which is called G-Try, right? So this is what excites me in Silicon Valley. Not the guys who are creating, the next Facebook, but actually are connecting the world of atoms, the physical world, to the digital world.
That's interesting. So reaching the technology is not getting expensive anymore. So everybody can reach the technology.
I think that's a key message.
They can easily use. They
Absolutely.
can create efficiency and the productivity. For developed markets, the productivity is the king. If you are not productive enough, you cannot compete to developed markets. That means there is an opportunity for Turkey, for India, for other emerging markets as well.
Absolutely. I think if you have kids, teenagers, many of them actually are going to be not just consuming technology. I think they'll end up creating technology. You see that already with Facebook, where people create content. If you think about Facebook, right? Facebook makes money out of us. They have 1.3 billion people who are creating content. That's almost not fair, right? But that's what's happening. So the next stage is what happens that instead of just creating content, for Facebook, your kids and your children begin to create applications or maybe these kind of devices because, as you said, the technologies are getting cheaper and cheaper. That's why also we call it frugal innovation. That is, innovation is becoming frugal. It is no longer expensive. And that's something that could be disruptive for a lot of companies because you don't need a big R&D lab. You don't need to come up with a lot of patents. You use open source, hardware, and you just need, a tiny room, in a university, to start disrupting the, an industry.
Maybe we have to change first our mindset, because if we believe that we can do it, we can do it. There is a technology to do it, and it's reachable.
Yes, I would say the mindset is important. The second thing, the two controversial things, if I would like to say, is that the mindset is about essentially how can I solve real problems, right? So that means it's a mindset, but also it's about the heart, right? You have to connect both. So the heart has to lead. The heart has to connect with the real problem. And that's why I say that what matters is that you become an expert of problems rather than being an expert of a solution. Because in the past, it was being an expert of a solution. I come up with a technology, and then I make a product, and then that becomes my cash cow. I milk it as much as I can, and then I come up with another technology. So people used to be experts of solutions. The new model is you become an expert of a problem. You identify a problem, and you say, this is such an important problem in my personal life, like in the case of Jack Andraka, who lost his uncle to cancer. So either it's a personal problem, it's a societal problem, and then, as you said, the mindset is, I will be able to find all the resources I need to create the solution. And that means the second controversial statement is that knowledge is no longer power. Ignorance is the source of power.
Definitely.
Industry after industry, what's happening? You look at, hotel industry. We are in a hotel, right? Airbnb. The founders are not experts in hospitality, right? Uber is not an expert in transportation. In the banking, you begin to see the same thing as well. Your telecom companies becoming a banker in Kenya, right? So the less you know about an industry, the more disruptive you can become. And that's the kind of new model we are evolving towards.
What do you think about the big companies? In the morning session, there was a discussion that big companies are getting bigger by buying the smaller ones, and the big one takes the rest.
Yeah.
Do you believe in that, or the small companies still have a chance to survive with an innovation or something else?
I am not a big fan of, buying companies because in Silicon Valley there are some tech companies who are 30 years old that have got very big by buying other startups. And what happens is that as they get bigger and bigger, they have trouble essentially maintaining the innovative culture. So when you buy a startup, what people don't understand, you don't buy the technology, you buy the people. And if your culture is no longer agile, those people that you bought will leave the company. And then you're screwed, pretty much, right? So that's why I think that buying, if you're in a, like a refinery or that kind of industry, very asset intensive, that's a different, kind of thing. But if you're buying a startup for, cutting edge technology or the know-how, that is in the, mind of the people, right? And if you don't have the right culture, they're going to essentially, leave very soon. That's one point. My kind of favorite topic for 20 years, I've been, that my thesis was on that, is what we call open innovation. That is, instead of buying a company, why don't you partner with them, right? So we see some, very interesting examples in that space. The company called Accor Group, which owns Novotel, and companies like hotel chains like that. So Accor Group actually has nominated for I think it's the first person in the world was a title. It's called SVP for Entrepreneurship Advocacy, Senior Vice President for Entrepreneurship Advocacy. So his job is actually to go and identify promising startups, or it could be a good partner for you, because the idea is that if you are working with some promising startups, you will invite them over, do a presentation in front of their executives, and if a startup is very promising, they will immediately go and partner with them, do a pilot project, and if it's successful, they will try to scale it up. And the other role this person has is to start changing the culture of Accor as well. And say, you know what, if the purchasing department, takes like, or the accounting department takes like 6 months to invoice pay the startup, they can survive. There's such a, tight cash flow, if you like. Or the legal system takes, creates like a 50-page contract for the startup. They can handle that. They may need just one-page contract. So I think it will be interesting, rather than buying companies, maybe if you partner with them and then creatively use them, to either increase your own innovation capacity, and more importantly, start changing your culture as well. So GE, General Electric, with the new vice chairman, Beth Comstock, chairwoman, that's also what they're doing. Their new mantra is essentially, partner, partner, partner. So Beth Comstock, their vice chairwoman, she travels a lot to Silicon Valley. And I remember now, she's coming back. Interestingly, they even had a maker kind of event in Istanbul last year, which is a very interesting story because they actually want to go around the world to identify promising startups to team up with.
So we came to the end of our discussion. Would you like to say anything to Turkey?
I mean, my comment is very simple, and I think I will kind of leave with that, is that Turkey is at the crossroad, right? You are almost like an emerged kind of economy, no more emerging economy. So you are at the crossroad, right? And the crossroad is a very good word because you are at the crossroad of a Silk Road, in the historic time. So think about two crossroads I see right now. One is in terms of what economic model you want to maintain in coming decades. And that's why I talked about, this concept of frugal economy, frugal society, which is going to be almost like a new approach that is very different than what the West followed, for 200 years, and could become an inspiration for other, emerging markets as well. The second thing is that I use the term crossroad because I actually think that the next big role that Turkey can play is to be a bridge between different cultures, different parts of the world. We talk about East-West. That's a very simple way to look at it. But it could become more precise. I was just reading this interesting article in The Economist that predict that in 20 years, maybe the so-called Pacific Rim will become less strategic than an Indo-Africa Rim. Right? In other words, these are going to be, two big economies in coming, kind of decades. And if you look at the world map, you are kind of, smack in the middle, right? So I kind of see essentially Turkey playing a very important role as almost like a hub in kind of cross-pollinating these best practices, so what I'm getting at is, more south to south kind of economic integration, commerce. And I see Turkey playing a key role, in enabling that. It could be at the commerce level, but it could also be in ideas, innovation level as well. So Turkey as an innovation hub in this kind of, India-Africa rim, that I would like to see, happen in coming years.
I agree with you because when I look at the audience here, I see very good exporters, very good constructors, very good bankers. So these people are operating all around the world. Therefore, I believe that Turkey will succeed this scenario as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you very much for your participation.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.